Okay, we're going to work on the science packet. I'm just going to read through it, and you can read along with me if you want to. So I'll just go ahead and start sharing this. These are numbered for the actual practice test you're going to take. So on problem number 1 here, transfer of heat energy. Heat can be transferred in 3 ways. Conduction, it's a transfer of heat through a solid object from a source of higher temperature to the object with lower temperature. For example, when a pot of water is boiling over a fire or the stove, the flames don't actually directly heat the water, but rather it heats the flame and it conducts through the metal pot and then to the water. That is what transfer of heat is. Convection, heat transfer in a gas or liquid by the circulation of currents from one region to another. For example, the example gives molten material moves through the Earth's mantle layer in a convection current. Radiation is heat transferred by electromagnetic waves. Electromagnetic waves, all waves of energy, including visible light, microwaves, infrared, X-rays, and radio waves. All right, and we're going to look at number 2 and 3 here. 2, body temperature regulation. During strenuous exercise, the body temperature increases. The body responds to the increase in temperature by sweating, which helps to reduce the body temperature. This is an example of excretion. This is all under the heading of body temperature regulation. Subduction zones. A subduction zone is the place where 2 tectonic plates collide, causing one plate to bend and slide underneath the other. And here is a depiction of that. It slides under. Question 4, writing for a scientific paper. If you're writing for a scientific paper, you must include the key details of your experiment. For instance, your question, hypothesis, materials, procedures, etc. You do not, others would not be able to repeat or verify your experiment. Stop that one there. We'll go to 4.5. Zoom in a little bit. Anatomy of a scientific paper. This is just an example. Are all the apples red? By Ida Cortland. Abstract. We examined several apples' color. Although most are red, some are not. Introduction. An age-old question is, are there all apples red? McIntosh, 1993, thought so. G. Smith, 1999, begs to differ. We hope to resolve this issue once and for all. Methods. We went to the local grocery store. The first one was the hypothesis. The second one is the method. We want to go to the local grocery store and bought one of every apple they had. We took them home and looked at them. So it's something, their hypothesis, you can test it. So they went there and collected every different type of apple there was at the grocery store. You can prove it false, your hypothesis, or you can prove it true. So this is, in the results, we found 4 red apples, 1 green apple, and 2 yellow apples. Discussion, we found 1 yellow apple and 2 green apples. It must be true that all apples are not red. We concur with G. Smith's findings. There's the conclusion of a scientific paper. You had a hypothesis. You had an ability to test that hypothesis. The methodology was to go to the grocery store, get one of every apple, and then you determine results from that, and then you write your conclusion. Of course, you have your references Always have your references, and there's a little way to write that. Question 5, calculating speed given speed, distance, and time. Here's the formula. Speed equals distance divided by time. And then an example is, if you are in a car that travels 60 meters in 30 seconds, the average speed would be 60 divided by 30, which equals 2 meters per second. Let's go to the next one here. Six. I don't know if you can see that. Biological interactions. Competition. When species interact in a way that causes harm to each other, for instance, if two different species live in the same area and need the same food source, they would be in competition. Mutualism, when a species work together in a way that they both benefit. For instance, oxpeckers and rhinos. In this situation, the oxpecker, a bird, lives on the rhino, sustaining itself by eating all the bugs and parasites on the animal. Different food source, though, and they're working together, so it's mutualism. Parasitism, when species interact in a way that cause harm to one species and benefit to the other. For instance, a leech that sucks blood from a host animal. So the host animal is being harmed by the parasite, the leech. Predator-prey. A predator is an organism that eats another organism. Prey is the organism which the predator eats. Some examples of predator and prey are lion and zebra, bear and fish, fox and rabbit. Okay, let's go to 7, 8, 9. Question 7, lake effect on climate and temperature. Lake water tends to increase in temperature all summer. This indicates that it is storing up extra energy from the atmosphere. It acts as a heat sink through the summer. In the winter, however, there is less radiation from the sun. Then the lake becomes heat sources, giving up their energy to the atmosphere. Thus, the heat given off by a lake could extend the number of frost-free days. Human population growth. As the world population grows, less land and water are available for each person. Poor people, who often depend more immediately on natural resources and are less able to compete for dwindling supplies, bear the heaviest burden. Meanwhile, rapidly growing populations stress their own local governments. For example, in a fast-growing Yemen, the population has increased fourfold over the last 40 years, while the overpumping of aquifers has helped shrink the country's grain harvest by 1/3. Question 9, magnitude of force. The diagram shows 3 horizontal forces acting on each other. Neglecting friction, what is the magnitude of force F if the object remains at rest? That's the key thing, is if the object remains at rest. To solve this, simple is just add 8 and 14, which would be 22. So both sides going opposite direction. So this force here is going to have to equal the sum of these two forces, which is 8 plus 14, that's 22. So this F force would have to be 22. It'd be the same on both sides. Just add 8 by 14, whatever the numbers are, it's going to even out. So you put 22 on this side. So F will equal 22. Species protection. A sea turtle has washed up on a remote section of a beach. This is known as a stranding. Stranding occurs when a dead, sick, or injured sea turtle washes up on the shoreline. Which statement best explains why stranding should be reported immediately to local authorities? A, the information can be very useful to biologists and managers who are trying to protect the species. That's the answer. Question 11, weather and climates. The Great Basin of Western United States and the deserts of Central and Eastern Australia are caused by the rain shadow effect. A drier area on the leeward side of the mountainous area. Mountains block the passage of rain-producing weather systems and cast a shadow of dryness behind them. There's rain on one side and it's dry on the other. It's kind of like a shadow. Thus, the interior of the western United States is arid, semi-arid, because the western mountain block comes from the west. Go to the next one here. 12. Fossil fuels. A fossil fuel is a fuel such as coal, oil, or natural gas that is formed in the earth over millions of years from dead plants and animals. There's advantages of fossil fuels, and there's also disadvantages of fossil fuels. One of the advantages is well developed. The technology we use to harness the energy in fossil fuels is well developed. The main reason for this is that fossil fuels have been used to power our world for many decades. It's also cheap and reliable. Fossil fuels are cheap and reliable sources of energy. They are excellent types of fuel to use for the energy base load, as opposed to some of the more reliable energy sources such as wind and solar. Examples of disadvantages of fossil fuels: it contributes to global warming. Fossil fuels are not green sources of energy. In fact, they contain high amounts of carbon and have been blamed for being the main contributor to global warming. Another disadvantage is it's non-renewable. Fossil fuels are non-renewable energy sources. This means that there is a finite amount of fossil fuels available, as opposed to renewable energy sources such as wind and solar. It takes millions of years before the formation of fossil fuels takes place in any noteworthy quantities. Number 3, it's unsustainable. We are spending our fossil fuel reserves in a non-sustainable manner. Luckily, this forces us to think differently when it comes to energy, which results in the growth of renewable and green sources of energy. Another disadvantage is it's incentivized. One of the major reasons why fossil fuels are as cheap is a history of government incentives. Coal, natural gas, and petroleum receive $4.22 billion, most in direct subsidies. Solar, in contrast, got $1.13 billion. 5, accidents happen. They are not nearly as serious as accidents related to nuclear power, but on the other hand, fossil fuels will never have the safety of solar and wind. The picture above is from the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. Okay, 13, a wave is a disturbance that transfers energy from one place to another. Example, sound wave, earthquake wave, ocean waves, and electromagnetic waves. The different parts of a wave. The crest is the high point of a wave. If you look here. A trough is a low point of the wave. Wavelength, the length of one complete wavelength. From bottom of the curve to bottom of the curve, that's one complete wavelength. Amplitude, a measure of the energy a wave carries. It's determined by the distance from the crest or trough to the midline or resting wave. The larger the amplitude, the higher the sound. Frequency, the number of waves that pass a point in a given amount of time. All right. Species variation. Sexual reproduction involves producing offspring from two parents. Here, DNA from each parent combines together to create DNA of the offspring. This produces variation within a species. Asexual reproduction, however, involves reproduction from only one parent. Here, the DNA of the offspring is identical to the parent. Many organisms reproduce this way, including bacteria, fungi, some plants, and animals. Continental drift theory. Alfred Wegener proposed the continental drift theory, saying that at one time all continents joined together in a single landmass called Pangaea. It's all together. Currently, it's separated. The main observation that supports this theory is that identical fossils of animals and invertebrates are found on different continents. Identical rock layers were also found on many continents. 3 continents fit together like a puzzle. Fossils, a piece or trace of an organism that was once alive, they are mainly found in sedimentary rocks.